I think, public schools, this gets put in and this gets put in and this gets put in. And so you get to a point to say, we literally can't solve all of society's problems.
So Standing in the Gap is about giving back. It's about showing up for people who have no one else to show up for them. I am Dr. Tonjua Williams, president of St. Petersburg College, and you are listening to Standing in the Gap. Thank you for joining me today at Standing in the Gap. I'm Dr. Tonjua Williams, president of St. Petersburg College. I have the privilege today of speaking with Superintendent Kevin Hendrick. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell me a lot about how'd you get in this place? You have, been here a long time. You've worked here, lived here, learned here. You've been a coach, a teacher, an administrator, and now the superintendent. Tell us, how did this all happen?
Became a Pinellas County resident in third grade, moved here from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and since that time have really never left. Student in Pinellas County Schools, graduate of Largo High School, and went to college, and my dad said, do something that you're going to enjoy every day the rest of your life. And my parents did not go to college. They were hardworking, but they just said to me, you're going to go. We don't know how you're going to get there or how we're going to pay for it or whatever, but figure it out. And so I did and became a teacher and taught for Pinellas County Schools and then a high school administrator, principal, and eventually now superintendent.
Wow. So tell us about the county. How many students do you serve?
We have over 100,000 students from pre-K through our adult education. About 85,000 of those are in our traditional K-12 schools. But on any given day, you think about 1 million residents in Pinellas, 100,000 of those are in our schools, and then their families that count on us. So we like to think there's 300,000 or 400,000 people every day that are truly invested in what we're doing in our schools every day.
Indeed. One of the things that I admire about your work is your passion for partnerships. You've spent a lot of time with listening posts. That was the first thing you did. You had a lot of listening sessions, learning. Tell us a little bit about what did you discover, especially being an internal candidate and already being in the district. What did you discover at the listening sessions?
One of the things that I think was a little unplanned was because I was an internal candidate and I've lived here so long, people wanted to share their stories about Pinellas County Schools and the impact it's had on their lives, from themselves personally as a student to maybe a family member who taught in the district, maybe their parents. So it was a lot of those stories about how much they loved our schools and how much they wanted them to be successful. But as you talk about with partnerships, and you know this at your level, we can do nothing on our own. We really can. We have to work together, and that takes a lot of patience. It takes skill. It takes a lot of public work. It takes some work behind the scenes. But partnerships are so important to being successful, and especially in today's world.
Well, you give so much of your time, especially with partnerships. You're working at night, on the weekends, doing a lot for our community, and that's something that takes its toll. Tell me a little bit about what the challenges are of being the superintendent of over 1,000 students impacting millions of households. What are some of your challenges that you faced?
Well, all the ones that we know about, right? We want to raise student achievement. We need to make sure we're fiscally responsible, right? Those are sort of the two ends of the spectrum on just always the challenges. I think some of the more nuanced challenges are on elevating public schools in this time of school choice. We've been in the school choice business for a long, long time. 20 years ago, charter schools started to really become the choice. And now with, the state of Florida, we have a lot of opportunities for families to do homeschool, to do private school, and to receive vouchers for that. We welcome that choice, right? But it doesn't come without its challenges. And so as we continue to change our schools and look at how our schools can grow, it's all about really meeting the needs of families where they are. And the world of education has changed, as you know, in higher ed. And so we have to adapt to those changes as well. So that's a big challenge right now, obviously, in public schools. The way students learn is very different than it was a decade ago, or certainly when you and I were in school. And so we have to continue to adapt to that. And even just the attitude of people wanting to be teachers and that sort of public service mindset. So many jobs in our world now look at, can I work from home, right? We're a face-to-face business, 99% of our employees have to be in person. And so those are some of the day-to-day challenges.
You seem to move through them so easily. And I want to say that I am a product of Pinellas County Schools, and I am a proud product of Pinellas County Schools. And I believe that when you invest in the lives of others, you have an opportunity to change the trajectory of their generation. And when you talk about your students and the challenges that you have faced, I see you out there in the community making things happen. I see you working on ways to do it differently. I see you looking at academia and figuring out how can we teach differently but bring about quality. Those are things that I get to witness myself, not just as a college president and the partnership, but also in my household with my grands who get to come home and they're teaching me new ways of doing math and things of that nature. When you think about the impact that you're making, especially standing in the gap in those households of families that are struggling, what can the community do better to stand in that gap with you to support the work that's being done?
You know, when you invited me to this podcast and I, this catchy phrase of standing in the gap, I had to do a little research and I said, oh, this is a biblical phrase, right?
That's right.
And the Lord was looking for people to stand in the gap, right? I think they were looking in the Old Testament at literally standing in the gap of walls as people were, trying to get in. But it's the same in the work that we do, right? We need people who are going to stand for people who maybe don't have that level of support, right? They don't have parents at home. They don't have maybe the parent who's reading to them in early childhood.
Right.
At the end of the day, I've always said this, it doesn't matter, right? These students are in front of us. And so what are we going to do, right? Our job is to teach them to read. And whether they knew their alphabet when they got to school or they were proficient readers, it doesn't make a difference. We have to teach them to read. That's why we're here. And so now what are the resources that we need to get that done? Where does the community come into play?
Exactly.
So that's kind of our challenge. And we have to just get rid of this idea that, well, they don't have this or they don't. Who cares, right? We have to get the job done, period. That's why we're here. Part of that is a little bit of my athletics background and coaching. Nobody cares how tall your kids were. I was a basketball coach. They don't care. They just look at the box score in the paper the next day. Did you win or did you lose? And so figure it out. You have to design that game plan that makes it work. And so I think some of the things that the community has really helped us with is, number one, providing places for students to be after school on the weekends. And some of that's through partnerships. We have great partnerships formally with the R Club and YMCA in the city of St. Petersburg and other cities. But then it's those informal ones. It's churches. It's just, grandparents and aunts and uncles and the community centers, places that give students an opportunity to be themselves in a safe way. But also, what's the education value there, right? Can they do some of their homework there? Can you read to them a little bit? Will you just go over some things with them? So, coming out of the pandemic, one of the great things we did was equipped every student with a laptop. And in Pinellas County, because we're such a dense place, there's no place that you cannot get a cell service. And so we gave anybody who needs one a Wi-Fi hotspot. And so there's equal access now. No one has to go home and be shut off from the outside world. So whether it's just fluency practice in mathematics or basic ELA fluency practice, whatever that is, they can get that at home. And a lot of our community partners are helping us with our students to get there.
Well, I know that St. Petersburg College, we like to stand in the gap for others and be in the community to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And that's what I'm seeing you do in your work. And, the role of the superintendent it's a lonely road sometimes. Are there times that you do feel like, man, this is just overwhelming, this is hard? Who's your tribe? You got to have one. So how do you handle those lonely nights?
You have those close friends that you rely on and you talk to every once in a while. I'll give you a call. I'll call, other superintendents that are in similar situations. One of the things, though, that I've tried to do is when I get home, I want to be a dad. I want to be a husband, So I don't bring the trials and tribulations of my day home. Sometimes my family's like, really? We had to read about that on the news? You didn't tell us? But it's just healthy that way. It's just a healthy balance to say, I work a lot, you work a lot of hours. My family comes with me to a lot of events. But at the same time, you don't need to bring those things home. So you try to make that separation. I think also, there are people who have been through what we've been through before,
Yes.
right? Maybe not with the same rules and the challenges that come at us, but people have been through that before. And so you just rely on people who have good values and good ethics, and you try to just make the decision that's right.
I think you're spot on. And there are a lot of people watching you wanting to know, how do I get there? How do I get to sit in the seat and become a superintendent? And I do believe that your leadership can impact others to come as well. When you look at Pinellas County Schools and the employees, how do you stand in the gap to help them move forward?
A couple ways, and I think one of the things in terms of how does someone get where they're going to be, right? How does Dr. Tonjua Williams get to be the president of St. Petersburg College, homegrown, right? How does Kevin Hendrick get to be? The answer is be really good at what you're tasked with doing, and people will notice, and then they'll ask you to do the next thing and the next thing, right? My dad used to say to me, good work brings more work, right? So when you do good work, you get more work, right?
Steal that one.
But, I think that's the trajectory of your career. You excelled in that first job you had. You told me about coming into the college, and they said, wow, that Tonja's doing really well. What about the next thing? And my career's been the same. It's you try to just do right in what you're doing. One of the things about my work, and I think yours has been the same, I've never really sought that next position. I've enjoyed the ones I had. If I was teaching social studies and coaching high school basketball still today, I would love every minute of it. If I was still a high school principal, I would absolutely love it. And I loved overseeing academics. And I love this position too. But it's all about kind of doing what's right. In terms of our employees and standing in the gap, so many ways, right? I mean, you deal with the budget that you get from the state legislator. We do the same thing. So it's not like you have a whole lot of choices. Right. But you look for ways that, number one, can I give consistent raises over time, right? Can we just continually do that? Because you know the impact that has on their retirement, right? As you continue to build that up. Number two, how can we make this a place where people want to work, right? There's a lot of choices. And so they can work from home, as we talked about. There's other opportunities for them to work in education. We need to make this a place where they want to work. One of the things I did when I became superintendent is I elevated our core values around what we stand for as a school district, and we celebrate those core values. So we have opportunities for employees to recognize one another with those core values. We give certificates, we give pins. I talk about it at our school board meetings. Those little things make a difference to people, right? I also started, when I became superintendent, sending birthday messages to everyone who gets, on their birthday. And we had never done that. Some people wrote to me and said, I've worked here 25 years. I've spent most of my life here. No one's ever wished me happy birthday. And so just a little message like that. The other night I was at a dinner meeting that you were at as well. And I was walking in the door, and one of our teachers came up and said, Mr. Hendrick, thank you for your message this morning. It's my birthday. And her husband standing next to her said, yeah, I got to take her out here for dinner. And I just smiled, right? It matters to people that you recognize them in some way. And so those are a few ways we try to stand in the gap. Obviously, there's political ways that we try to elevate the teaching profession. There's ways in which we try to help them in Tallahassee. But at the end of the day, people, most of their time and our jobs are spent in their classroom or in their role. They want to be recognized for that. And yes, pay is one way, but mostly it's that verbal recognition and seeing, Dr. Williams, I see the job you're doing and I appreciate it.
That affirmation is so important to everyone. They want to know that they matter and that they're not hidden figures, that they're not invisible. And so, one of the things the superintendent just shared with us is his passion behind his purpose, and that's helping people. And that's what we have seen, I have witnessed personally in the day-to-day. And to be able to partner with him and do the things that we're doing, it really is changing lives. And that is what we are all about. I just have to ask this one question. When it comes to the lives of the folks we're serving, what brings you the most pride? What makes you just, that smile you just gave, what makes you do that?
One of the neat things, I was somebody who worked in secondary education, high schools for, 20 years. When I got to the district office and I really started to invest in elementary schools, I had to learn so much. My wife is an elementary school teacher, so I knew a little bit, but I really had to learn, and I had to learn quick, right? And so the joy in young kids is unbelievable. I mean, any given day, you're getting hugs, they're telling you about all kinds of things. So there's this joy in young kids that's really neat. I now have a son who's in middle school, and they're a whole different group, right? But there's joy in what they do, and there's purpose in them. But I think maybe that pinnacle moment in my business, and I think in yours, is those graduation days. I used to tell our faculty it's the Super Bowl, right? This is it. This is why they're here. But I think through that whole trajectory, the biggest joy I always see, whether it is a little kindergartner walking across and going to first grade, or if it's a high school student graduating, it's the look of the families and the pride that they have. As a basketball coach, I used to watch film and you're trying to break down what your players did and the other team. But I'd also look at the stands and look at the joy on parents' face when they see their children succeeding is unbelievable. And it's so neat to see. And we do that. We bring that joy to families. They made it to the National Honor Society. They're on stage here. I've been here for concerts for our orchestra and our guitar, all county. You look at the parents in this auditorium and they're smiling at the joy that their child is bringing them. And we've done that in partnership with them. And I think that's the best part, right? We can get students degrees, we can get them jobs, but how do we get them that satisfaction that carries through into their family? Because that's going to change the rest of their family's lives, right? And that's the part that I think is most fun.
At St. Pete College, we are like 40,000 students, 3,000 employees, and there are times where I find myself trying to do the external work where you're doing the lobbying and the corporate partnerships. And then, sometimes you lose your way on that internal piece. I mean, you have 100,000 students, right? So how do you remain relevant and they get to see their superintendent and know that they still matter?
That's a great question. You cannot possibly meet every single student and every employee all the time. One of the things, just like you do, I want to get to schools as much as possible, right? And when I visit schools, I don't want a dog and pony show, right? I don't need to, let's show the superintendent. I mean, that's nice, but I like to visit classrooms. So on school visits, I'll go in 5-6 classrooms. And when we come out of the room, I'll talk to the principal, assistant principal, tell me what you saw. Give me examples of teaching and learning that you saw. What was little Johnny doing over in the corner? How come we didn't have this resource out that we've paid for, right? Those types of things, because you need to see the work in action, right? You have to see it in action. I think, like you are only as good as the folks supporting you. Correct. So you've got to have a great team. And we have 128 schools, 128 principals. And so our principals need to be the people who see those students every single day, understand them, make them into the people that we all want them to become. You have to get out to events, all of those things. And people tell you everything about your school system, whether you want to hear it or not when you're at those events. But I think it's being visible and getting out there. Having a family of educators, I hear it from them as well. I hear it from my son, Dad, why did you guys do this? Why did you do that? But you get it that way. And then just I live in the community, you live in the community, so people talk to you all the time. I was out at breakfast the other day and on a Saturday, and this woman came up to me. I was paying my bill, and she said, "Listen, I just want to let you know you're doing a great job. And do you think you could work on this too?" So you get these little things that people give you feedback. But when you're like you started in a position in the district, and same with me. You always need to connect yourself back to that, right? Because we are only as good as every employee we have. And so I don't ever forget my time volunteering when I was in college and interning when I did a whole semester for free and was paying tuition, or when I was a first-year teacher. I have to remember those experiences and know also that my experience is different than this year's first-year teacher for a whole host of reasons, right? But still, we have to remember everybody that we're here to serve. And just being visible and present in the community and in our schools is probably the best way to get that done.
You're spot on when you talk about being visible. I think that the role of the superintendent, you're never not the superintendent. You're always the superintendent, whether you're at Red Lobster at dinner with your family or you're in church. Someone always, they want to share what their opinions are. Being emotionally intelligent and holding on to some of that, because it's not always peaches and cream. I remember being in one of my favorite shopping plazas, and I overheard 2 women talking about how horrible their experience was at a college. And I took the risk of saying, well, what college are you talking about? Only to find out it was mine. And I listened to them about how the system was set up. And I was able to take that back to the staff and say, here's what the students are experiencing, and address that issue. I would imagine in your role, there are several opportunities where you get to do a trust but verify and go and check that. What are some of the great outcomes of some of those types of listening, kind of following through things that you experienced?
You hear some of those stories from parents who aren't happy for whatever reason, and whether it's an academic reason, if it's an operational reason, like transportation was a big one when I became superintendent. Number one, you empathize with your parent hat on, right? I want what's best for my child. Right. And you can't ever get upset at them for advocating for what they want for their child. So you appreciate the fact that they're advocating, you appreciate that they're engaged, and then you just be honest and answer it, you know? We did one of our listen and learn sessions just last week, and when it was over, a gentleman from the crowd came up to me and said, I just want to thank you for just answering the questions. He said, you just answered the question. And sometimes you just have to tell people, no, we cannot do that. And here's why. But maybe we're not doing it yet and we should be, and we'll work on it. You know, you just have to be honest and not pretend that everything's perfect. And then obviously you have to follow up on some of those things, right? I think that's one of the big challenges. Is, you know, you get a text, you get an email, you get somebody in the grocery store, and it's like, how do you manage all of that flow of feedback that you're receiving? But you look for trends, you look for areas to improve, and then you just chip away at it. And, you know, you're never going to be perfect, not in a system like yours and in ours. But if you're continuously improving and moving the needle, people recognize that and they give you the benefit of the doubt.
And I think you're spot on when you talk about leadership and perfection. We cannot be perfect, but we can strive to do our very best with the tools that we have as of today. What happens when you feel like the expectations exceed the role of the educator? Because I know for me, at the college, I've had people say, well, I want to make this kind of money and I want to do this, but their grades don't reflect what is needed to be in a program to do that. So how do you handle when the expectations exceed the role of the organization?
I think, you know, public schools, this gets put in and this gets put in and this gets put in. And so you get to a point to say, we literally can't solve all of society's problems, you know? I think over the last couple of decades, certainly mental health has become a bigger issue that we've worked on with our students, but we cannot own mental health. You know, we don't have enough counselors, social workers, psychologists to own all of those issues. So what can we be? We can stand in that gap and provide safe spaces for children, provide an opportunity for them to talk to trusting adults, get parents involved and say, here's what we're hearing, right? But we're not going to solve every one of those problems. And sometimes that's what we're tasked with, right? You're tasked with being the economic engine of Pinellas County. And why don't you have enough people to produce semiconductors today, Dr. Williams, right? Right now. And you say, well, you know, we don't have the students. We don't have the program yet. Can we get this? Can we get that? And so we work at it, but we're not going to be the answer to semiconductors, hospitality, tourism, government leaders, nonprofits, I want you to produce more teachers, Dr. Williams. Why haven't you given us more teachers?
Because I need some money. You know, I think you're hitting on something that is real critical, and that takes us back to something that you're very good at, and that's partnerships. And being able to go back and say, we would produce more semiconductors if you provide us space, if you provide us the tools and the equipment, and why don't you give us a couple employees to teach? And we'll be happy to do that. And I think that as our roles continue to expand and the goalposts move, remember at one point it was get them graduated. That was it. Once you're done and you graduate, our jobs are done. Now it's, okay, now you got to get them into a high wage paying job. You can't just get them your product needs to, you know, guarantee that they're going to get a high wage paying job. So now we're going back, we're looking at our programs, we're scrapping what we feel is not going to yield to a high wage paying job, although the role is still needed in society, like childcare. Right. Okay, it doesn't lead to a high wage paying job. However, we need childcare providers to help. And so that partnership is so critical. And it's something that we have to deal with every single day. Is there any day that you don't consider a partnership, you don't make a call to someone to say, hey man, When can we talk about this?
Every day.
Every day.
And you have to know what's of interest to the folks you're talking to on the other end of the line, right? Because it's not just about, you need to serve us, right? You need to serve the college. You need to serve the school system. There's also, and you have this, and we share this, is there is value in a liberal arts education,
Yes.
right? There is value in understanding how to compose a letter free of grammar, right? Mistakes. There is value in having to have speech and debate, right? I think SPC is a place where ethics is a required course in speech and debate, right? Those are valuable in society. And so regardless of your career, shouldn't you have an ethical background?
Yes.
Right? And so these are ways in which we have to also stand in that gap and say, I know we want to produce people who have the ability to do these jobs, and we have to produce people who are moral and ethical and understand how to communicate and are able to do other jobs than just the ones that are in front of us right now.
Right, and those are the skills that our workforce partners are asking for. They're seeking that, and I think that one of the challenges for us in higher ed is AI. AI is great. I think it can be a helpful tool if we're able to help our children and our students understand the proper role of it, because there are times when technology does not work and you need to be able to use this technology that's in your head. And if you don't have that, you can't, do the work. We're looking at how do we help our employees utilize AI in the best manner. And I think that is also something that we need to look at. What technologies are out there and what's the best use of them while we're educating?
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that we need to look at as well.
We've actually asked our students that question. So we have a group of students at St. Petersburg High School who, as their capstone project in one of our programs, are studying AI for this entire school year and are going to give a presentation to our school board and to me and others in our district leadership on what we should do as a school system around AI.
Please invite me to the presentation. I want to be there for that.
Because sometimes they give us better answers than we can come
and
up with.
Can I bring some of my faculty
You can.
me so they can hear
Absolutely.
From our young folks what they believe it should be? I think that is brilliant. That is brilliant. I want to get in on that.
We'll invite you.
I'll be there.
Good.